Hello and welcome to week 8 in Statistics for Psychology. And we're getting close to some of our tests here. We'll be getting into that after break. But here in week 8, we are doing chapter 8. And we're going to be looking at tests and hypotheses. And it's really getting into the notion of the basic terminology that we use when we are discussing tests for significance and the development of hypotheses. So in the discussion, I'm asking you to contemplate the notion of the null hypothesis. And the null hypothesis is of the two hypotheses that we construct for every research question. The null hypothesis means there's nothing going on. We didn't find anything. There was no correlation. There was no relationship between these two variables. And contemplating the importance of that, it is, as psychologists, we are certainly looking to find the relationships between things, but under what circumstances are we really, where it's really important to recognize that there isn't a relationship between two things. And the problem in the world of psychology is when you have null results from your study, you conduct a study and what you find is that there's no relationship between the two variables that you found or the multiple variables or whatever. You find nothing there, nothing to see. It's difficult to get that published. Most of the sort of philosophy of publishing work is that we want to publish significant results. When those results are statistically not significant, it's harder to get that out, but yet some of those results are incredibly important. So we'll be discussing that. It's both a critique of the field of psychology and its struggle with dealing with null hypotheses, while at the same time dealing with the, what do we learn when we find out that there is no relationship between two variables? In the quiz, I'm having you do kind of introducing you to each one of these very important ways of thinking when we start talking about tests and hypotheses. The first one has to do with the tails, one-tailed versus two-tailed. And what the tails referring to, the term tails refers to, on the normal curve, the tails are on the low probability ends, both on the plus side and the minus side. A one-tailed test would be one that addresses a hypothesis that says the results will go in only one direction. Things will be greater, things will be less, things will be improved, things will disappear. Each one of those words in the hypothesis points to which kind of test you're going to use, a one-tailed test or a two-tailed test. However, sometimes we're interested that it could go either way. We do an intervention and it may be helpful, but it might be harmful. So let's say in like medication treatments, we often use two-tailed tests because we want to make sure that we're taking into consideration that the medication may have a negative effect as well as the predicted positive effect. So in those particular circumstances, we're looking at a two-tailed test where we're open to the idea that this could go either way. So in the quiz, I give you a couple examples of research questions, and I want you to tell me whether that would be a two-tailed, could go either way, or a one-tailed test. The question itself defines the direction that we're looking for. The second piece is a number of research questions, and I want you to write the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis uses, both hypotheses. For each research question, we want to write an alternative hypothesis and we want to write a null hypothesis. Now, let me explain that terminology a bit, like what alternative. The presumption in almost all of science is that nothing is going on. The presumption is null. There's nothing going on until you show me something is going on. So the accepted hypothesis is the null hypothesis, unless there's data that convinces me to consider that there's an alternative hypothesis, meaning the one that displays that relationship. So it's kind of a mindset of nothing's happening, nothing's going on, there's no relationships unless you show me evidence, and then I will consider an alternative to nothing going on. So what you're looking at is the question, and you're going to write the alternative hypothesis, which describes the relationship that is being stated in that question, the proposed relationship, and then the null hypothesis, sort of almost standard language. There is no relationship. There is no relationship. That you can you write out the details in the alternative hypothesis, and then in the null hypothesis you simply write, nope, there is no relationship. And there's some examples in the course book about how to write that. So that's the second part of the quiz. The third part, it has to do with type 1 and type 2 errors. And these are, when we get into some of the tests, what we're going to see is within the formulas and within the testing tools that we use, we actually take into consideration variables associated with the risk of making type 1 or type 2 errors. So I have you answer a couple questions about those. So you can wrap your head around type 1 and type 2 errors. While all this is going on, we're in the middle of registration. And each one of you needs to register for research methods this summer. My understanding is that's your plan to graduate. So all of you need to be into that class. I'll be following up on that. Make sure you're in there. If you have other classes that you have to take, start registering for fall. But I think all of you are heading toward the end of your program. Midterm grades are coming out at the end of this week. And what that will entail is I will go into the grade book. I will do everything up to and including week 7. And then, depending on the information that I have in the grade book, I will come up with some way of giving you a balanced feedback on how you were doing so far. And I will use that to submit midterm grades. I will submit those midterm grades to the portal. They will not be in the Brightspace grade book. And but I will post an announcement telling you how I arrived at that grade, so you can understand what I took into consideration, if I weighted things, or maybe I just looked at your attendance grade, your discussion grade. Sometimes I've done that where statistically speaking, attendance predicts final grades, regardless of the ebb and flow of grades on assignments and whatnot. High attendance tends to correlate with final grades. So sometimes just attendance is a very good predictor of how well someone's going to do, or how well somebody's doing at the midterm point. Now, that happens. That's going to happen before or on Thursday, because Thursday night I'm leaving the country for spring break. And so I will not be around for the whole next week after that. We are coming up to spring break. I hope you find time to not do coursework and spend time relaxing and enjoying your family, enjoying your hobbies, getting your mind away from statistics for a while, regrouping so you can come back and we can charge to the end of the class strong. So, have a great week this week with tests and hypotheses. When we come back, which will be week 10, we skip week 9 because that's spring break. When we come back on week 10, we'll be going into z-scores, which is actually our first analysis of relationships outside of correlations. And so z-test we'll be playing around with the normal curve and looking at some of that and some of the ways that we use standardized tests and whatnot will be when we come back. I like that stuff, so it's going to be fun when we do that. I hope you like it too. So have a great week, be well, and I will see you next time.